Cord 25 can be the difference between you getting to move a load from A to B and getting paid.
Oh, absolutely.
So my background is I'm a second generation trucking insurance nerd. That's all I like to say. I'm very fortunate to have been mentored by my father, who started in the early 70s. He was an insurance manager for Thurston Motor Lines. For anybody that's on the call and remembers them, they used to have, I think, over 2,000 drivers and employees. And he talked about how they had to hire 8,000 some years. So he said driver turnover has been going on since the 70s. And then he went to work at Protective Insurance and then the insurance retail agency side and wholesale side in the 80s. So fast forward a few decades, I come to work with him and help running their family agency, insurance agency and brokerage, and realized this insurance operations is not really efficiently done when managing vehicles and drivers. So we created, or my team and I created, separate of the agency, a company called Mesh VI that stands for Mesh Verified Insurance, or Connected Verified Insurance. That's a big fundamental thing that we're focused on, is connections, whether it's through technology, so FreightValidate, Mesh VI, or through the human connection, because that's the whole goal of this task force, is bring the minds in the industry, network. So we're very focused on connections, both with the relationships that we create in this industry, as well as the technology relationships. So we're excited to talk about a little more what that means. And the VI, for to reiterate, is verified insurance. And we'll get into
cool.
If for those that want to really nerd out and understand how you can move the bottom line based on an insurance certificate, please tune in. It might not sound sexy, but we're going to make it that way.
I love it. Hey, anything that involves FreightValidate is suddenly sexy. You know how many people I ask, hey, do you know anything about FreightValidate? Oh man, I love FreightValidate. I'd love to get to know Dale. So Dale, introduce yourself. Tell the world about you.
Well, I've been in this industry for going on, this is my 34th year, nowhere near as long as the ancient guys like Jeff, who's been around probably since Christ was a corporal.
Great. Thank you.
So Jeff's been around for a long time, and I've learned a lot from him. But I've been doing this for about 34 years. Before that, I was in the Marine Corps, the Marine Corps Reserve, where I spent a lot of time as an inspector general on the OIG team. So that's helped me develop, like, how do I find problems? We're almost like at war when we're fighting fraud. So I look at that enemy of fraudsters like I did look at the enemy, during Afghanistan, Iraq, and all those things. So I've learned a lot from the inspector general side, where find a problem, make sure they're ready to go to war, and then find out ways to be better at what we're doing to fight the enemy. So we've come a long way with that. And I've really used that to fight fraud. When I sold my brokerage last January, I really dug deep into all in and fighting fraud. I built FreightValidate to help my own brokerage, but then people started learning about it and hearing about it and said, how can we make this public so we can use it? And that's kind of where we've gone. Andy brought up collaboration and connection. You guys know me probably longer than anybody since I started this stuff. And one of the first things I ever said was, I think it was on the Logistics Lounge podcast, that if we don't collaborate, the enemy's going to win. And I've said the analogy, and I'll say it again. I spent time in the Marine Corps, and anytime you fight a war, not just one service wins a war. You have to overlap the services, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. They all have certain elements. And if you don't have those things, the enemy falls through the crack. That's why we have to overlay these things. And, when we talk about the insurance, right now, all we have is a PDF file of a certificate of insurance. And that doesn't mean anything other than you have a copy of a certificate of insurance.
Correct.
That's worthless. And I compare it to a boarding pass at the airport. If I give you a boarding pass from last January, when I got this thing, it doesn't work on today's flight. Same as a COI. When I got that during the onboarding process, that doesn't work for today's load. And that's why I think it's so important that we combine these two things together and make sure we know who we're dealing with. Again, I always make the analogy of the airport. Before you get to the gate, you have to be able to show your identity, who you are with 100% certainty before you even get in. Then you have to show a boarding pass that says you are who, you're supposed to be there. That's where the COI comes in. Once you get past those things, now we can go and check and see what you have in your bag. Are you wearing a belt? Or, you have more than 3 ounces of liquid? Do you have a gun in your bag? Those are all kind of things that lead up to this thing. And again, I look at the insurance piece as the boarding pass. Should you be here, and are you able to get on this? Is this the right plane? So that's where I really think that Andy's program is really what we've all been looking for a long time. We've heard COI, what's behind the COI, all that language for so long. Anytime you have a PDF document, it can be manipulated. It can be, wrong. It can come in the wrong hands. With an API dealing directly with the agents and the producers, you have real-time data. If you add a truck onto your policy because he's maybe leased on for a certain trip, that doesn't reflect on that COI that's been hanging out in that database forever. We have to know that that this load is covered, not that the company has insurance, because they have to have insurance to be in business, have their authority. We need to know that this driver, this truck, and the company are all insured today on this shipment. Yeah, Andy is thunder, but I think that that's why I'm so excited about it. I become so passionate about this stuff because I'm like a nerd that's like is on steroids.
Or a nerd that's really old.
Or a nerd that's really old. Shit, I got kids your age.
Well, that's the important part about COIs. COIs are only valid for the date and time that they're actually produced. So 10 minutes later, the carrier can go ahead and pull a truck off, say they turned the truck in, sold it, whatever, they add drivers or what have you. And you never really know at the end of the day what is really going on at the carrier. And that's one of the things that really excites me about this new integration that you guys have going on. I don't know if you have the possibility to do, can you do a demo of that? You guys have the ability to do that today, or is that not yet set up?
I didn't set it up for it, but
I know I sprung that on you. I apologize. I should have said something to you backstage.
To make that happen. Not today.
Yeah, we'll try to get some kind of a demo set up for our viewers at some point. Maybe we'll do a short or something offline and get that out there. But what's really interesting about this is you can actually see the changes as they happen in real time, and that really excites the heck out of me. I don't know how many times when I was a motor carrier, I had to constantly think about, okay, I'm adding a new truck because my lease got turned in. They're handing me a rental while my lease is getting worked on. So I've got to go and I got to contact my insurance and get that updated. And it may only be for a day, but God forbid I had an accident in one of my trucks because I'm in a rental and something happens and then I'm not covered. I mean, God, it was a nightmare as a carrier worrying about that. I can only imagine what it was like for a broker, at least back in the days when I was running my own box trucks. It's just scary as hell thinking that you may make one little mistake and not be covered. But the fear is more on the broker side. I can't even imagine it.
And if you take it just a step further, and I'm sure Andy can probably expand this better than I am because I'm not an insurance nerd. There's one thing when you have bodily injury and personal and property damage. That's what BIPD and all that kind of thing that's required through the FMCSA. There's also cargo insurance. Yes. How many times has it been where a guy says, "Hey, I need $250,000 worth of cargo insurance." The guy only has 100. He calls his agent. His agent updates it, sends a new COI. He loads a truck, puts a seal on it, drives away, calls the agent back, says, "I don't need it after all." That COI doesn't change. So with our program, we'll be able to know, and you can probably explain a little bit better, but that's another piece that people are just totally missing.
Yeah.
You're muted, Andy.
Muted.
I think it might be helpful for listeners to know a little more about what Mesh VI is fundamentally and who uses it and how the data we're talking about comes to be. Because I'm not sure if the listeners are freight brokers and motor carriers. So for the motor carriers that might be on the call, you can use Mesh VI. The primary users of Mesh VI are the insurance agencies in the trucking and transportation space. So you can be cargo vans, any type of wheels. So the insurance agencies then provide you access the motor carrier, whether you're one man or woman shop or 10 or 100 or thousands. You can manage your vehicles and drivers right within Mesh VI. It's mobile friendly. It's a mobile friendly website, meshvi.com. So if you get a second vehicle, or maybe you have one vehicle and it's breaking down and you need a temporary replacement, you could be getting that temporary replacement certificate of insurance in seconds, at most minutes, depending on your policy, because Mesh VI is a shared platform. You're going into the same platform that the insurance agency goes into, that maybe even a wholesale insurance broker that you may or may not be aware is also coming into. So That's the engine that then outputs this certificate of insurance, that Accord 25. MeshVI creates the certificate of insurance. So we're creating a PDF. So what we said, well, okay, we've got our primary customers, the insurance supply chain and the motor carriers. Why don't we have that same data? Instead of looking at that Accord 25 PDF that can be manipulated, AI, hell, there could be cyber. When you're emailing these PDFs to people, if somebody opens it, is it legitimate? Is there a phishing attempt? Have they just hacked into your bank account? Are they going to start following around your mobile device for 6 months and then know that you've dropped kids off at the daycare or the substitute teacher's name because they're seeing your email addresses? That's happening. Real life, not exaggerated story. But by coming right to the source through FreightValidate, the freight brokers and shippers can extract that same data that's created on the certificate. Instead of seeing auto liability, 1 million, effective date January 1st, expires January 1st of 27. They just see that same data embedded right on screen at FreightValidate. Get notified, was there a cancellation due to non-payment or other things for, say, February 5th? Well, that might be for the auto liability, but the cargo is actually January 10th. That data is really important to the freight brokers and shippers. So if you're not feeling comfortable with that level of transparency, you're going to need to get on board with it because the industry is going to require it. So those that are comfortable with it are going to be wearing it as a badge of honor and pride because they know we're doing things the right way. You can trust us. And hey, if there's a non-payment issue, we all have many people that go through that. You make the payment and it goes back live. There's no issue. It's live. That's the key. We're talking milliseconds live. So that's a little more details on the users of MeshVI and then the consumers through FreightValidate of our mesh verified data through computer term we call API, which basically means application interface.
And the other part about that is how many of us have waited for our insurance? Hey, I need a certificate of insurance. You have to call the driver back in. Get your insurance company hasn't sent to me yet. The agent hasn't sent my insurance certificate. Those days are gone, right? Oh, yeah. The other part is have them email me. It's all by email. It used to be fax, right? Email me the certificate of insurance. When that comes over, like Andy mentioned, with cybercrime and cybersecurity, another email thing coming in there is just causing more problems. If they can just look at a screen, there's nobody sharing that information across an unsecured data field or data process.
Oh, absolutely. And the ease of use, we really built MeshVI for the motor carrier to have an easy to use and understand platform that they get value out of. So that's self-service. You can add new certificate holders on there. So if all of a sudden you're hauling for Echo or CH Robinson, you can quickly add them as a certificate holder. It's very self-service, easy to use. And we automatically do it at the vehicle level. That's the other thing, like Dale mentioned, part of why it takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes, hours, or days for your agent to get you those certificates back is not understanding the systems that many agencies use that are not using MeshVI. They're not built to handle transportation well. They're not built to handle vehicle level certificates for auto liability, cargo, physical damage that maybe I'm covered when I'm driving my vehicle, but Dale's not covered if I'm out sick and comes in unless Dale gets approved. You then have to get that into a system, maybe even run an MVR. Does Dale qualify for Andy Sharpe's trucking auto liability? And some cargo policies and some physical damage policies to protect the banks require MVR review. So we embed all that in our platform. And so that increases the trust. So the more layers of data through collaboration, like MVR is embedded. The agency can run that MVR instantly in our system, so you get that certificate verified more quickly. ELD is integrated with Catena Clearing. Get those vehicles automatically instead of having to manually type a confusing 17-digit VIN. If you have 2 units and you add a third, all of a sudden Motive populates through our integration. It goes to the agency, hey, Dale's now driving unit 3. Do you want to add this? Accept. Boom.
Hey, Andy, can you talk a little bit about a big buzzword we're hearing a lot now is exclusions?
I was just about to ask that. You're reading my mind, Dale.
Exclusions in what capacity of cargo commodities or from a driver of vehicles?
Mostly cargo. That's what I think the big buzzwords going on now. Your claim is denied. You had an exclusion, right? So how will this fit in to help with that new big buzzword?
Yeah, it's a great thing. When my father hired me, I mentioned I'm a second generation guy in May of 2001. He taught me that cargo insurance is the trickiest thing a trucker buys. There is no standardization. The policy forms are all over the place. It comes down to the endorsements many of the time. So it might look like a great policy, but then it says excludes alcohol, but you haul beer.
Yep.
So you got to really be attentive to all the policy wordings, including exclusions. We don't have live yet a bunch of cargo exclusion data to share, but that's coming. And so what fundamentally, there's three buckets I like to focus on when it comes to cargo commodities. Is it excluded? Is it silent? Or is it included? What I mean by silent means there's no specific reference to alcohol. So if it's silent, that's a good thing. You want it to be silent is actually a very good thing and very common for a situation. The goal is not to be excluded. Why the third one comes into place of included is those high risk items, copper, aluminum, beer, wine, whatever it may be, electronics. Electronics, is that TVs or is that little tiny transistors that could be worth $5 million on a 53-foot dry van? So included means specifically endorsed to include, so there's extra comfort at the shipper and freight broker level. So we're going to really streamline that. And sometimes, especially for smaller fleets or non-fleet accounts, you might get a specified shipper endorsement for a cargo limit. So maybe you have 3 trucks. Well, only truck number 3 hauls for ABC shipper manufacturer, and you only want to pay excess cargo for that one unit. That's tricky to do, right? So then the time of an agency to type or do all that in a certificate is complicated. We're going to make that very seamless. We already have it seamless on the vehicle level certificates. They can put it in there at the vehicle level and have instant loads. That way you don't have to keep asking for unit 3 protections each time.
How about for riders for split BOLs? For instance, some time ago, I was moving a $3 million load that was on 3 trucks. We had split bill of lading. So what about riders that would cover the second and third one? Because you'd have the primary, right, which would be the number 1 truck that had the bill of lading, and then you've got sub bill of ladings or split ones for load number 2 and 3. How would that cover it? I mean, I know what I did back in the day, but I'm just saying, now. And then the follow-up question: you pick up a load, you're insured today, right? But you're traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast. You're halfway there, and your insurance policy runs out. Who gets notified? How do you? Because you have to have the human element besides a tool. And Dale and I have always talked about this. Tools are great. They're wonderful to give you a heads up, but without that human element, that personal touch on it, things could go horribly wrong really quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned like a long haul trip. We've seen cargo policies that are written for 500-mile radiuses and somebody's driving 3,000 miles. So there might not be coverage because it was misrepresentation. So that's the other thing. Just as a policy, having a policy document doesn't guarantee coverage. Correct. If there's misrepresentation to get said policy, there might be exclusions. But back to your initial part of that question. So if you've got 3 split loads, is it on 3 different units or on 1 unit, 3 different trips?
Right. It's 3 different. It's on one bill lading, split bill lading, but divided on 3 different trucks.
So 3 different trucks. So
let's use a PO number. Let's use a PO number. Same PO number.
So typically an insurance policy doesn't care about that. Typically, the ones I've seen in my career, it's either going to be on a specific vehicle. So if you have 3 different vehicles, you need to have 3 different specific vehicle coverages. If it's not on a blanket on the motor carrier itself, or if it's a per trip. So in this case, if it's a one-time thing, you got this split bill of lading on 3 trips, 3 different units. You don't want it all year. You say, you know what? We're going to have 3 trips, 3 different units. And so they'll put coverage on each of those units for each of those 1 trips. So it depends on how the cargo. Yeah, it depends on how it's structured because first goal is always motor carrier level, just named insured. But if it's more cost effective, do it on it's only one time a year, 3 trips, 3 split bill of lading, or 1 bill of lading split 3 ways. Yeah. Then they might do a trip excess policy or a first party shipper because it might be a few $100s instead of a few thousand.
Right, because sometimes depending upon what trailer it is, they might deny receiving on one of those 3, like Walmart. I'll just throw it out there. Walmart, it happens a lot, and they decline the whole load. All the other 2, right? They decline. They put a claim in for the whole load because you've got the one PO number that associates with the whole. You might have 10,000 units over 3 trucks, right, on one policy. For the audience out there, how would you cover that in that specific case?
So in that specific case, with the information I have on it, my first thought depends on what the commodity is. Mm-hmm. Is there a contractual obligation that it's an all or nothing? So if there's not a contractual obligation, then it might be they can deny it, but they are not going to be successful in denying all that. They say, look, actually your exposure is only 1/3. So if 2 were successfully delivered, all those widgets were fine. Only item 3 was wrecked, or if it's a delay, perishable type of thing. It all depends on the terms of the contract. And then the cargo coverage, does that cargo coverage have contractual liability that gives broader implications versus if there's no damage to the asset, then why on earth should there be a claim?
Right. And I asked this because to your point, Andy, earlier, when a shipper gives information to insurance provider, they have to be honest. They have to, because they try to skim and saying, you know what, maybe if I just don't really tell them everything, I'll get a cheaper rate on an insurance policy than what it really is until a catastrophic event happens. That's why I wanted you to talk about that, to let people out there know that please be precise. Like if it's classifications or weight and it's shoes, but it might be high-end $3,000 pair of shoes compared to sneakers that are $200, and they just say, just put down the class for sneakers or whatever, shoes in general. So it's so important and imperative for shippers to tell the brokers what they're actually shipping, and when the brokers go out to procure, that they have the right coverage for the cargo that's actually being shipped, not like something that's just, hey, it's this, but it's that.
Absolutely. And also to be very aware if there's any certain stipulations, especially if it's a high target commodity, there might be an unattended vehicle warranty. And so they're like, well, what if I have a rest break? Well, did it require a team driver? Did you say there was a team, but there's not a team driver? And the reason for the team driver, so one person could watch while the other one hits the restroom or a lunch or meal break. Know those stipulations, because that could be really important. Another thing is if it's first party shipper coverage, or if it's a trip excess or a cargo excess policy, know the terms of that. If it's a follow form policy, so you got a $900,000 excess of $100,000 for that full $1 million per load, but your underlying $100,000 claim excludes Dale when he's driving Andy's truck. Guess what? Zero coverage.
But that's not, I mean, that's all fraud right there. I mean,
sometimes it's not fraud. It's just negligence.
True too. True.
Just the unknowing. So the key is you have to empower and seek out to know. Should you have known is going to be a big thing.
Yeah. Andy, I was going to ask you one other question. I just want to kind of clarify one of the things we talked about when you look at FreightValidate, you'll see the coverages and all those kind of things without having to see the Accord. But there also is a button to click on to see the actual Accord document that you could download. Again, that adds a level of security because you're not having it emailed. You can just print it right from the website. The second thing is we hear a lot about, I need to be named as certificate holder. Tell me a little bit about how that works within Mesh.
So it's really easy. The motor carrier, we've already got our master big list of thousands of certificate holders. So you can just type it in if it's not already listed on your system, and select it. And as soon as you can print it, view it, or email it right from MeshVI to the freight broker contact. I'd always suggest you email it from our system so they see it comes from us and not from you, the motor carrier, because many of them will not accept it if it comes directly from you. They want it to come from the agency or a system the agency uses or consumed through a company like FreightValidate.
What about what about an additionally insured endorsement?
There's a whole different level of how that's handled. Is it a blanket AI that an agency might be able to put on an insured that where under contractual requirement, additional insured is required, they can automatically put it on all certificates? Or if it's a per request, might even have a charge. So the agency might have to come back to you and motor carrier and say, hey, it's $50 or $150 for, maybe it's 50 for the auto liability and 150 for the general liability. You got to know which coverages actually need it. And I remember in the 2000s, there must have been some big conference, I don't know if it was TIA or what back then, that started telling all the attorneys in the freight brokerage community and shipper community, you must get named additional insured. Back then, the Accord 25 wording worked a little differently than it does today. A lot think you have to be notified if the policy is canceled. It used to use terms like the agency must endeavor to notify the certificate holder of a cancellation. It's not how it works. If you look at the latest version, I think it's 2016, Accord 25, it's based on the policy terms on how they handle notifications or the lack thereof. So this additional insured request started happening because they started thinking it was giving broader coverage than it really does. They're already covered by what's called vicarious liability for choosing the motor carrier to haul the load. So they're already going to have defense costs and all these things involved in most cases. I could go on and on just on that topic alone. Tommy Rook has been teaching, for those that aren't aware of him, the kingpin of trucking for decades.
Yes.
I've known him since the early 2000s. Burlington, North Carolina is where I'm from. If any of you know, is a huge truck insurance hub. So anyway, Tommy's taught that story for a while. It's like, hey, we'll give you an additional insured. It's worth about the same as this, toilet paper. There's some nuances, some unique cases where it does add a little extra layer. But operationally, I believe was your main question. It depends on the needs. And the type of the policy, the size of the account. If it's a small or less than 10 unit operation, they might charge you per one. The agency just has to get your approval, and then they'll set up a new certificate template potentially for that one additional insured. So if it's like Nucor, if you're hauling, for Nucor, they have very strict requirements, general liability and the per locations and various things. A lot of those endorsements do have a charge with them. So the agency will then have to get you, the motor carrier's approval. A, make sure you're understanding the request. B, give you the pricing. If you choose to get that pricing, then they can issue the certificates on your behalf and get the policy endorsed. So one of the things operationally, what we're able to do very quickly is the agency is an approved issuer of these certificates. That's why our primary customers are these insurance agencies. You don't need to wait for the policy endorsement because they know what they're allowed to do or not to do in many cases, or most cases. So they can go ahead and issue that certificate and then notify the insurance company separately and get the invoice, and you pay for it later, depending on what they're allowed to do in the insurance company. That helps you get that certificate to move that freight faster, right? For those agents that are saying, well, I got to wait for the bill, get it paid. If you're not a good payer, they might not issue that certificate until you've paid. So there's a lot of nuances that come into play that the agencies have some control over. Our goal is to remove as many blockers as possible to let you move freight faster from A to B, and the shippers and freight brokers trust your data through FreightValidate.
Well, Dale, you mentioned that there's a button on FreightValidate for you to get the Accord if you need to get that. If you needed one as additionally insured, is that possible yet, or is that something that has to be done through the insurance broker?
So it depends on which user persona we're talking about. If you're a motor carrier, you would just go into MeshVI. If you're a freight broker or shipper through FreightValidate, that is very doable. I think we might already have it because I think if FreightValidate's listed with the wording, it can work as in our current integration, but we'll have to explore that nuance to make sure it's fully working as intended. But yeah, we already had planned for all those templates to be available for FreightValidate.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Another question I have that I'm not really positive about, I think I know the answer, but I'll let you kind of tell everybody that maybe doesn't know the answer. But insurance can change by a minute. Could have coverage right now, in half an hour, it may be gone again.
Correct.
If I book a load today, does MeshVI have an ability for me to go back on, December 14th and see if that truck and that driver were insured that day?
Oh, absolutely. We have a whole audit trail. We were built, I didn't tell one of the stories about my father, but in the 70s, as insurance manager and then claims manager at Protective Insurance, he could settle $1 million claim in the 1970s. So very fortunate to be mentored by somebody that's a claims expert, which means he has a lot of courtrooms. So we built MeshVI from day one to be defensible in a courtroom to help get claims paid and not play. Well, what that means is we have a transaction log and audit trail of about everything in our system. So absolutely, you can see who made what changes. Backdating changes can happen, but at the insurance level, motor carrier is not going to be able to come in January 2nd, add something from November 14th. But the agency can go in there if they have the documentation that they're allowed. Maybe it's just a notification only, there wasn't coverage, and then the coverage is effective today, but they actually added the vehicle November 14th. So we have all different types of added dates based on coverage for vehicle or driver. Yeah, absolutely. Defensibility for all parties.
And is that also visible in the FreightValidate interface?
The new vehicle level stuff, I don't think your interface will necessarily show the history. It's available probably on a callback. But something definitely could be discussed if the need is there.
Yeah,
well, I do a lot of investigation work, and from time to time, I do need to know what was on a policy as effective on a certain date, and that's a interesting thing that I'd like to know.
Absolutely. And seeing your moniker of double broker bounty hunter, please, we don't have to talk about it now, but before we end this, I'd love to explain why we think this partnership with FreightValidate can help eliminate so much double brokering.
Yeah, another thing I want to just say about that really quickly, the COI, you can't go back really easily and go back to whether it's My Carrier Portal, RMIS, any of those companies, and see the COI to see if that truck and driver were covered that day. We're trying to eliminate that issue to say, whether it shows on FreightValidate or not, it's still there. When the claim happens, we'll find it probably a lot faster than you could find it if in the old traditional way of doing business with a COI.
Oh yeah, FreightValidate. Let's say there's a question to your point on the investigation. All they have to do is reach out to the MeshVI team. We'll go to the transaction logs and confirm it.
Exactly.
I'm definitely going to have to get together with you and make sure that you are on my direct contact list anytime I'm investigating insurance issues.
Yeah, I just wrote them down.
Yeah. I mean, I deal a lot with that in my consulting business, and not just with the task force, but I think pretty much every double broker claim we have come across, I got to go back and I at least got to pull an old COI to figure out what the heck was going on. It's just part of our standard procedure, and it's critical to know what was happening on what day. And frankly, at the end of the day, it's all going to come out in the wash as you go through an investigation. Whatever coverages were existing at the time of the incident, it will come out. There's no two ways about that. But staying on top of it, like what you guys are doing now with your new integration with FreightValidate, I mean, I can only see so many great things for brokers to be able to look on real quick. FreightValidate. Okay, is Joe Blow actually listed as a driver for this company? Yes, he is. Okay, fantastic. We're good to go. And then maybe 2 days later, take another quick check. He's supposed to deliver. Is he still on that policy? I sure as hell hope so. Especially for the freight brokers that are out there that have penalties built into their terms of service or their agreements with motor carriers to sit there and say, hey, if you're running somebody who's uninsured, X number of fine or whatever, because I see a lot of those in contracts these days.
Two other things I want to add, and I'll let Andy take the second one. The other part about when you look at a COI right now at any of these other platforms, it has a date that it was produced. It could have been 5 months ago. If you go to our platform and pull up the certificate of insurance, the Accord, it'll show a date timestamp of this very second, not 9 months ago. And then the other part that Andy would know more about that I forgot what I was going to say.
Monitoring?
Yeah. If the person does a trip lease, like he's picking up a load 4 days from now.
Right.
We talked about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Remind me to talk about the monitoring and AI agents, especially with some of the new technology, seeing like the CH Robinson news and some others. But yeah, no, we're working with a big group of cargo vans, and as you know, those are handled an entirely different way and in a different world in our industry. And what we're able to do in our platform is integrate with TMSs. As of today, January 22nd, and I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, so it's 12:40 p.m. You're the freight broker. You go into FreightValidate. You don't even necessarily need to view the certificate. You just say, hey, is there coverage right now? Yes. All right, I'm going to book a load with Sharpe's Trucking. I want to see the vehicle. Which VIN is Sharpe's Trucking going to be using for the pickup on January 25th in 3 days?
Yep.
Okay. After booking, now I feel comfortable. I'm going to show which VIN is going to be picking up. That's going to help solve double brokering right there. A, you're seeing coverage. B, it's going to solve double brokering because you're going to be able to validate then. So then at the pickup on January 25th in 3 days, use Mesh VI through FreightValidate's data to say, hey, is this driver and this VIN actually who showed up? But also at the same time, make sure there's coverage. So nothing didn't change from booking today and 3 days from now. Mm-hmm. Then you release the load. Then it's delivered in 2 days from then. So at consignee or warehouse or wherever the drop-off is, verified again before accepting it and taking responsibility of that load being delivered. Was it tampered with? Who knows? Is there a shortage? Who knows? That gives you a lot more trust in that supply chain. So on that note, instead of checking each of those 3 times in the steps, we're turning on next month a live monitoring service as well. So instead of manually putting your eyeballs on it, you just get notified.
Gotcha.
Is that going to be running through FreightValidate as well, that notification process?
Absolutely. And that gets me to the point on the AI agents. So a lot of talks about, AI taking over the world in many capacities, including software companies, et cetera. There's a lot of power to it, we believe. And the key is having trusted data and structured data. So that's where having this, monitoring of the certificate of insurance. So whether it's CH Robinson's AI or whatever, if they ping FreightValidate with the Mesh VI API, they're going to be able to have the instant data throughout. They don't have to verify separately. They go to trusted data sources to automate that. So if you're not in that ecosystem, you will lose out on loads. That's where the world is going to. So wear that badge of honor with pride and know that it's going to unlock revenue for you.
And we call it the preferred carrier or preferred broker program. It's very much like TSA at the airport. There's 2 lines. If you're in our line and you're good to go, you're good to go. If you're not, you may not ever get the load because you're waiting in line behind the TSA guys that are in that line.
Yeah, great point. You can go to meshvi.com/network/pledge if you're a freight broker or shipper to sign the pledge. And all we're asking for in that pledge is safety to the side, all things equal. You're going to prioritize and give preference to live insurance data over stale because you know the trust that that's going to bring with it.
Got a question for you, Andy. Why don't insurance companies take a hard stance on non-domiciled drivers? Like instead of the FMCSA putting all these rules and regulations out there, why don't the insurance company says if you have hired a non-domiciled CDL license holder, you will not be insured?
I can't speak for the insurance companies, but talking to one of the gurus that will be, for those that are going to be in the Atlanta area, suggest you join us at the Driver Legitimacy Summit. And we're going to be talking about items right around that. So I mentioned earlier, we have MVRs ordering both for the motor carriers. So if you're a motor carrier, you want to run your MVRs and monitor your live monitoring of your drivers to make sure they don't have a DUI that you don't know about. Same thing with this live monitoring of certificate of insurance you can do for your driver's MVR. We can see who has a non-domiciled CDL. The problem with that is on an MVR, you don't know, is it an illegally issued or still active one or not? So that's the flaw there. So if the insurance companies, I would presume, say, well, how are we to know if this is one or not? And basically, as long as it's not an intentional act, the driver will be covered unless it's on one of those policies that excludes the driver or requires a driver inclusion stated list.
The problem is that a non-domiciled CDL is not illegal. An improperly issued non-domiciled CDL is illegal. Correct. And so that's where we're working with the FMCSA, as a matter of fact, to build some AI to say we need to check immigration records against the CDL to make sure that non-domiciled CDL is valid or not.
And you know something, Dale, as a follow-up to that, with a non-domicile CDL license, high probability they have a problem with ELP. High probability.
If it's a improperly issued non-domiciled CDL, because the non-domiciled CDL started because if a guy lived in Boise, Idaho, and he wanted to go work for night down in Phoenix, he would get a non-domiciled CDL in that state, and so that he could drive back and forth between those two places because he's going to school in Phoenix. The deal was when he got back to Boise, he switched back over and got it. The problem is we got into a loophole and we changed state to international. And so people started coming in. So the improperly issued CDL is almost always, when we, in our platform, we show if a person's been placed out of service for ELP, 9 times out of 10, he had a non-domiciled CDL and vice versa.
Exactly.
And I'm sure there's underwriters that, to your point or question, Jeff, that are looking at those violations, not the MVR, but the violation. And then I'm sure they'll spot check. If they see it on the MVR, they might have some antennas raised, and that might choose whether they're feeling comfortable quoting an account or renewing an account. But it's coverage. It's not a coverage issue.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more companies being called out when, like we tell everybody at FreightValidate, if it came up and shows that the person's placed out of service or a driver for that company is placed out of service for non-domicile CDL or ELP violation, that means that you better take additional care in talking to that driver and have your shipper talk to that driver because, like the Secretary of Transportation said, we're going to start holding shippers to account. So we just give them an extra heads up because 9 times out of 10, if you hired a guy that can't speak English and you have a 300 truck fleet, he's not the only one.
Correct.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of pockets that like to skirt the rules as much as possible. And we work with some international community that's wanting to do it the right way. And that's why, even especially for them to stand above the fray, they want to wear that badge of honor. Hey, trust us because we want to be transparent. Here's how transparent we are. So that's, I think, really going to be key is those who feel comfortable being transparent and those who don't. And if they don't, why not? I mean, I'm with, like, I don't want government overreach and oversight more than the next guy. But sometimes you need that transparency from a business operation, especially with these crazy lawsuits and nuclear verdicts. And we don't have time to go on another topic of a SCOTUS ruling and the update from last night, et cetera.
Here's something that's really important, that why timing is right. We're talking about the cargo vans, vehicles under 10,001 pounds. No one really monitors them, right? None of the vetting platforms know exactly how they're supposed to work. They don't have to have a DOT number, all those kind of things that matter, right? But why this is so important right now for us to be able to monitor their insurance, their drivers, and all those kind of things. 17,000 people lost their license in California due to non-domicile CDLs. Another 8,000 down in Texas, I believe. 6,000 out in Massachusetts. So just those guys are not going to be put out of business. They are entrepreneurs. They're working for fraudulent folks everywhere, right? So what they're going to do is move into the Sprinter van community. They don't need a CDL. They don't need to speak English. They don't care about ELDs and hours of service. They're going to be migrating over there. And that's why this platform is so important right now, because that's not simple rulemaking to change those laws about those guys. That takes a congressional act. So if we can prevent some of that from happening through what Andy's built, that's going to save that industry, that segment of the industry, a lot of problems.
Yeah, I do see box trucks and Sprinter vans, the non-CDL world, reeling now with the influx of new drivers and new capacity, which are causing rates to plummet in those sectors. You
60
know,
cents a mile.
yeah,
60 miles the average rate for a sprinter van right now.
It is insane, and there are legitimate guys out there trying to make things happen. But of course, what these guys are doing is they're going bad. They're breaking bad, to use the vernacular, only because they're trying to save money and compete with everybody else who's coming in who may not have a valid insurance policy or fake insurance policy that they're not paying on. It's just somehow they're still getting a filing out to FMCSA to stay active. It's crazy, the impacts that are happening to the non-CDL side of this business right now because of the transition of the non-domiciles into a non-CDL capacity.
I've been learning more about the non-CDL cargo van world because I'm a trucking guy. So I've learned a lot more in the last couple of years. And Dale, your point, I didn't realize they were making less than $1 a mile until a couple months back, and learned it was more like 75 for some, and now you're talking 60 cents. My first thing that came to mind is the IRS mileage deduction rate.
70.
Higher than that. The cost to operate a vehicle alone. So I just pulled up for 2026, 72.5 cents per mile for business use. If you know the IRS is giving you that, it's probably higher cost. So how on earth can you be a profitable business with actual wear and tear?
And that's the problem. You don't have to be. You're not paying for, you're not giving low rates. Most of the bad guys in this sector are not giving the low rates to get the freight. They're getting the low rates to learn about that company in this lane so they can steal freight down the road.
Correct. They're setting them up.
Yep.
And then the
stuff from you guys.
The good guys can't compete with that and then what happens is because the good guys are trying to compete with it, they have to start cutting corners. They don't buy tires when they need to. They don't do their pre-trip inspection. They don't replace the light bulb. They can't afford to. And so now everybody turns to crap.
That's survival. I mean, desperate people do desperate things in desperate times. And we've been in desperate times for like 3+ years now.
Way too long. Way too
long. And that's why escalating.
This is why industry has to kind of take over, because we're so far ahead of the agency. I mean, the things that it would take the FMCSA 10 years to do a lot of things that, RMIS, Truck Stop, FreightValidate, Carry, all these companies do. It would take them years and years to do it. They've been working on a modernization program since 2013.
And that's
years.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we're doing the things. We're taking it in-house. We need to do that. And to your point, you say it all the time. We talked about it many, many times, Dale. It's collaboration. Everybody needs to get on the damn same page. If we're going to prevent something, it's not going to take a single person. It's going to take an army from all angles.
And like we said in Jacksonville, the smartest thing that we could do is get Andy, me, anybody that's working vetting and those kind of things at a round table at the FMCSA with head of registration and the administrator and say, we know how to vet very well. We can teach you. We're not going to go out of business if that happens because, like John said, people are still going to break bad. But let's not let the bad guys in the first place.
But here's the problem with that, and we've discussed this, Dale, as well. There's a lot of big egos that will not do that because they don't want to give up their proprietary information, how they
don't want to. Private guys who don't want to come.
They don't want to give it up.
They will be left to the side. Those people will be left to the side because we see it just from when we first start talking about FreightValidate, what we were doing in 2022, 2023. When I said facial recognition verification back in April 2023, people thought I was crazy. Big Brother, all these kind of things. Now who's using it? Everybody. Even SCAC. To get your SCAC code now, you have to go through facial recognition verification. So, and I said about collaboration back then. Back in those days, no one would collaborate, right? But now you look at today, you got my carrier portal. I'm integrated with them. Carrier Sure's integrated with them. You look at Truck Stop. They just bought Denim, who's integrated with me. They just integrated with Verified Carrier. So people are coming together. We've been talking about it for 2 years, but it's finally coming together. So the people that don't come together are going to be left to the wayside because they'll feel that they can't be trusted because they don't want to join the bigger cause. Because we have too many people out here that are like cancer doctors. If we solve cancer, we won't have any patients.
Correct.
So a lot of these people do not want to stop fraud because they'll put them out of business. I want the bad guys to put me out of business so I can spend time in the sun with my grandkids.
There you go. Yes, absolutely. That's why we're doing the things that we do. I mean, we're not money hungry by any means. I mean, we're running the Freight Fraud Task Force is a nonprofit 501c3, but it takes some money for the folks to do what they do in the back room, just like the Salvation Army. They don't do things for free because it takes an army for them to get out there to do what they do. Well, the same thing for us as well. You want to solve things, we put the right people in the right places. The SMEs, because nobody's an expert out there. Nobody is a know-it-all. No one. And we need to get those SMEs to join forces with us that really know that segment of the industry so they can put a stop to it. And we all need to do that. Seriously.
Yeah, and it's not just the vetting companies that need to come together. You need people like Andy, who knows more about insurance than anybody I've met. Maybe Tommy Rook has got it right up there with him. But you bring the pieces of the industry together also.
Yes.
You have to bring in some law enforcement. You have to bring in some insurance. You have to bring in some of this. But now we have to bring the agency. We have to bring the government agencies into the mix too, so that we're all talking the same language. And this is the first time you guys, saw Derek down there. He feels that same way. Yeah. We've got to, and like one of the things that sticks in the back of my mind that Derek said, of all the stuff that I've heard this guy say, you can't unsee some of these accidents. Safety is so important. We got to make it so that these law enforcement officers and even sometimes truck drivers are the first person on the scene and see a baby laying in the highway because some idiot ran over them. We've got to work together so that truck drivers and law enforcement don't have to unsee that again.
Yes, because you'll never outlive that. And the other thing too, and we talked about it too, with all the 5 million trucks on the road every single day, 26.1% of them are OOS or unroadworthy. That means 1 in 5 trucks that everybody on this podcast right now passes might take you out, might take you and your family out. Man, that's a huge concern. That's scary.
And 9.4 of them out of 10 don't have a safety rating.
Yep.
94% of the companies on the highway do not have a safety rating.
Yet they're on the road.
That's going to change, but it's bad. But again, it goes back to this insurance thing. We got to make sure they're insured, all those kind of things. We got to fight it the best we can. We're not going to fix this thing overnight. It's kind of like when I was up to about 350 pounds, I didn't lose it all in one night. FMCSA is not going to lose all this weight overnight.
Absolutely. Guys, we only got a couple more minutes left. So let me go around the room real quick and get people to put up their final thoughts. Dale, you first.
Okay. I'm really excited about this integration, like any integration, but this is probably the most meaningful to me right now because it hits so many different levels and helps so many different people. That's why I'm probably most excited about it. If you need to get a hold of me, you can reach me at FreightValidate.com or on LinkedIn. I've been known to post here and there on LinkedIn, so you can probably find me there. Or at FreightValidate.com is our website.
Here and there, Jesus, Dale, if you don't have a post at the top of my feed, I call you to figure out if you're still alive.
Yeah, call 911.
Yeah, it's the number one thing that pops up in my feed every single morning. Only a little bit, Dale. Come on.
Oh, Andy, what do you got, sir?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I love learning from you guys and doing what we can to help fight freight fraud from our insurance perspective, because we're an insurance operations platform. So those that want to join and fight the freight fraud on the freight broker and shipper side, I reiterate again, go to meshvi.com/network/pledge. And you can sign the pledge to join and reach us there too.
Fantastic. Guys, it's been fantastic having you out here. I've learned a bunch of extra stuff. I know enough about insurance to be dangerous. And I get a lot of people who look to me to try to give them some solid advice. But I tell you, if I didn't have guys like you in my corner and in my network, I don't know where the heck I'd be. So thank you so much for taking the time to come out and speak with us today. I am so looking forward to actually seeing this integration in work. Jeff, what do you got, buddy?
Yeah, thank you, Andy and Dale, for joining us today. It was very educational, for those out there that really don't know what COI is. At least you have, some more information about that. So if you need to get in contact with these folks, please reach out to Andy and Dale. Also, the Freight Fraud Task Force website is up. It is going forward. We have a lot more content to add. to it. And then also coming up real soon will be the Freight Fraud Summit, which will be in New Brunswick, New Jersey, coming up in April or May. That's moving forward really quickly. We're going to have a new website up very shortly. So stay tuned, follow us. Have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to myself or John. We have a huge committee and volunteers that are working with us. We will answer your questions as soon as we possibly can. I appreciate you guys for joining us again.
Awesome. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
So folks, next week we have Ryan Joyce of GenLogs, who is going to be our guest. We're going to be at a special time. It's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern time next week for that interview. So please be sure to check us out. Your check is sitting on the table. Please make sure you tip out your server, and we'll see you again next time on the Tic Toc Diner. Take care, folks.